Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, for 1 year as we learn from Venerable Fulton Sheen, one of the greatest Catholic teachers in modern times. Join me, Amy Thomas, once a week for a short reading out of Bishop Sheen's book, Way to Inner Peace. Welcome, welcome, welcome to another year and a new book by Venerable Fulton Sheen. I am so excited that you have decided to tune in and join me in season 2. The podcast name has changed, and I probably should have realized that when I did Sister Faustina's podcast this last year, but we live and we learn. So our podcast will be called Journeying with the Saints, and that enables me to change to a different saint each season and have a new reading without changing the podcast name. But we are going to have kind of an introductory podcast today, just kind of going over who Fulton Sheen was, why I picked him, and how this year is going to be different than last year with Sister Faustina's podcast. And so if you don't have the book, Way to Inner Peace, I highly encourage you to get it. You can just Google it and you'll find it somewhere. It's on Amazon, I believe. But our readings this year are going to be a little bit longer. And so I think you're probably going to want to have the book because pretty much the whole thing you're going to want to highlight. But but it will be helpful to read along with me, I think, because the chunks are a little bigger. Instead of those bite-sized pieces that we did with Sister Faustina, these are going to be a little longer. And sometimes the mind can drift. I know that. And I just think it will be helpful. You don't have to get the book, obviously, but I do encourage it. So let's talk about Venerable Fulton Sheen. Why did I pick him? Well, there's kind of a backstory. So in 2005, my family went to New York City. My husband's cousin was graduating in Connecticut, and after her graduation, as a family, we all decided to go down to New York City and do some sightseeing. Now, at the time, I was not Catholic. And I just had a baby, my middle daughter, her name was Sydney, and she was there strapped onto my chest. Our 4-year-old Rihanna was tagging along, and we were totally out sightseeing, doing all the touristy things. Well, on one of the days, we had been visiting the Rockefeller Center area, and St. Patrick's Cathedral is not far from there. Now, my husband's whole family is Catholic. I was not. I was the only non-Catholic in the group. And they all decided they wanted to go see St. Patrick's Cathedral. And of course, I wasn't going to object, but inside I was like, okay, go to Catholic church, whatever. I was very negative about most things Catholic. I was slowly starting to warm to it because my husband is very good at giving arguments, and he had destroyed every misconception I had about the Catholic Church, but I was still stubborn and hadn't fully got on board yet. So I wasn't super thrilled about going to St. Patrick's Cathedral. We get there and we walk in, and gosh, looking back now, I was such a stubborn fool. Because when you walk into St. Patrick's, now I've seen pictures since then, it is stunningly gorgeous. I mean, even if you aren't a believer, to just walk in and appreciate the architecture and the grandeur of it all is something that any reasonable person should be able to do. I, on the other hand, was so hard-hearted, I couldn't even enjoy it. I kind of stood in the back like a grumpy, sulky baby, and I didn't even take a picture. There is no picture from our time inside that cathedral, and I love taking pictures, and today, if I went in there, I would be like pictures everywhere. So I could share them with my followers on social media. And I just stood in the back and I was just grumpy. And my husband was walking around just in awe. And there was something, though, that moved me. And I didn't want to admit it because I had never been in a cathedral before. I had never seen the inside of a church look that way. And I was impressed. I wouldn't have admitted it, but I was impressed. And I realized in that time that we were spending in there that something amazing was going on. This building was built to raise our minds to God. I mean, that's what our cathedrals do. They raise our hearts and minds to God because they are so magnificent, like the temple that Solomon built. It was where God dwelled in the Holy of Holies. In our cathedrals and our churches today, Christ dwells in our tabernacles, and we build our churches in such a way as to glorify him and show his majesty. Now, not all churches are glorious like a cathedral, and there are some simple churches that can really move you as well. I've been in those myself, but the point of these magnificent cathedrals is to raise our hearts and minds to God. Anyway, I left that day and, walked out of that cathedral, and I did think about it. I did. And again, I wouldn't have said that to anybody, but it really did move me. Now, how this connects to Fulton Sheen. Well, he was a pastor there in that church, and he was the bishop in Rochester, New York, and I think that encompasses New York City, I think. Anyway, he was at St. Patrick's Cathedral. He was initially buried in that cathedral. And so that connection to me means something. Another reason why I chose Bishop Fulton Sheen is because he died the year that I was born. I obviously was not a Catholic when I was born. I wasn't baptized Catholic or anything like that, but that kind of just meant something to me. And one of the biggest reasons is because he is a teacher, and I like to think that I'm a pretty good teacher, and the way that he teaches just speaks to my soul. He is a no-nonsense, cut to the chase, lay it out for you type of guy, and I love that about him. I love listening to him. He commands, kind of the stage, if you will, and he draws you in. A lot of his videos that you can watch online are in black and white, and there's nothing going on, but he commands the stage, and he compels you to want to listen. And so I just love that about him. And I love that he calls Christ our blessed Lord every time he talks about him. It's just such a reverent title. So anyway, that's why I chose Venerable Fulton Sheen. I know he's not a canonized saint yet, but I trust that will happen. And if you're a venerable, then, you're on your way, are you not? So a little bit about Fulton Sheen. He was born May 8th, 1895 in El Paso, Illinois. I definitely need to make a trip there. And he was born with the baptized name of Peter John Sheen. So we've never heard him called that, but the reason he's called Fulton is because that was his mother's maiden name. And so he came to be known as Fulton Sheen, and I don't think anybody ever calls him Peter John. He had 2 doctorate degrees, and he was fluent in French. He was ordained on September 20th, 1919, and he became a bishop on June 11th, 1951. So that's quite a few years in between being ordained a priest and becoming a bishop. Now, he was a mover and a shaker in the media world. I can only imagine how he would have used social media to draw people to Christ. He had a radio show that was called The Catholic Hour. It was very popular. He also had a television show that was called Life Worth Living. And he won 2 Emmys for these media productions. He was very, very compelling, like I said. And a lot of people tuned in, even non-Catholics, because they just wanted to hear his messages about Christ and about moral living and about living a Christian life. He just laid it out for you, and he did not beat around the bush. He died on December 9th, 1979, and the amazing thing is that he died while praying before the Blessed Sacrament. So what a way to go. If you're going to go, the best way probably is praying in front of the Blessed Sacrament, I would say. And so as we go through this book, Bishop Sheen is going to say some things that may ruffle your feathers a little. I don't know. They might. I've heard some people, get a little worked up about the way he delivers things, but sometimes we just need to hear it, plain and simple. And he is that type of guy. He just lays it out. But I invite you, as we go through this book, to really self-reflect. It is a self-reflection book. Now, it is different than Sister Faustina's diary in that he is writing to a reader. Obviously, Sister Faustina's diary was meant to be read. Christ wanted us to read it. However, she wasn't directly writing to us. She was just jotting down her thoughts. The book that we're reading this year, he is writing to us. And so we need to self-reflect on what he's saying. And we may have to take a hard look in the mirror. I mean, we really may. And we look at the world around us, and there aren't a lot of people taking a hard look in the mirror. And I think that is where change actually starts, is when we realize the things that we need to change in our own lives. So how this year is going to work. Okay, so last year was a daily podcast. If you have the book in front of you, you'll notice that there are 59 numbers. So what we are going to do is each week, we will read one of those numbers. Now, you are fully welcome to prep and read it ahead of time and then read it with me once the podcast drops. Or you can wait for me to read it and you read along, and however is best for you is the way to do it. However, there are only 52 weeks in a year, so we will have 7 leftover numbers. And so I'm just going to fit them in throughout the year, and we'll make it work. I don't need to worry about that. Some weeks we might have 2 podcasts. So hopefully the podcast will drop every Monday. That's my goal anyway. And this year it's going to be a little longer than last year because we were doing a daily podcast. I wanted to keep it very short and sweet. My goal is to keep it under 30 minutes. I don't want to go much past that, and I think that I can do that. We will basically have the same format as last year, where I will do some readings and then offer my reflections. And like I said, bring a pencil, bring a highlighter. You're going to want to underline the things that he says. They are so good. There are so many times when I'm reading Bishop Sheen's words and I'm just like, dang, he gets it right every time. He's just amazing. And he absolutely loved our Lord and our Mother Mary. So I am so excited to go through this with you. Encourage your friends if you can. And like I said before, if you subscribe to my website, www.catholicpilgrim.net, you will get the podcast dropped in your email whenever it drops. You can find it on iTunes or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. So I'm excited. I'm so glad you come along to join me as we journey with Venerable Fulton Sheen. And I will see you when the first podcast drops. And until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.